homeless woman helps an elderly man who fell in the street, but what the man did drastically changed her life. It was another tough night on the streets, and Delilah was trying to find a corner that could offer some warmth. As she curled up to escape the cold, a scream broke the silence of the night. "Help! Someone, please help me!" Delilah's eyes widened and she quickly stood up. Her heart raced and she looked around, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. Without thinking twice, she started running towards the scream. When she got closer, she saw an old man lying on the sidewalk groaning in pain. He looked weak, scared, and tried to move but couldn't. "Hey, are you okay?" Delilah asked, already kneeling beside him. I fell. "I can't get up," the man replied, his voice trembling. "Please, don't leave me here." Delilah looked around for help, but the streets were empty. "Calm down, I'm going to help you, all right? You're going to be fine," she said, trying to sound confident, even though she was nervous inside. "Please, help me. I can't move," he repeated, gasping. "What's your name, sir?" she asked, trying to calm him. Jonathan, he answered, his voice weak. "Jonathan, I'm Delilah. Don't worry." "I'm here with you," she said, looking at him carefully. "Do you have a phone? I can call for help right now," Delilah asked. "My phone? I think it fell out of my pocket," he said, pointing weakly to the street. Delilah quickly found the phone at the edge of the street. "I'm calling them now, hang in there." She dialed emergency services, and while she waited, she kept looking at Jonathan, who was still holding her hand as if that was what kept him calm. The operator's voice came through on the other end, and Delilah explained the situation as quickly as she could, telling them where they were and what had happened. "They'll be here soon," she said, trying to stay calm. "It's going to be all right, Jonathan. We're going to get through this together." While they waited for the ambulance, Jonathan breathed heavily, trying to distract himself from the pain. He looked at Delilah, who stayed by his side, holding his hand firmly. Despite the pain, something in him wanted to know more about this young woman. "You didn't seem like you were just passing by. What were you doing on the street at this hour?" Jonathan asked, his voice weak but curious. Delilah hesitated a little. It wasn't easy to talk about her life, but something in the old man's eyes made her feel like he truly cared. I live on the streets." Jonathan was surprised. "On the streets? But someone so young. How did that happen?" She took a deep breath. "My dad left when I was little. My mum had problems with drinking. I ended up with no one. I tried for a while, but things didn't work out. Since then, I've been here, trying to survive." Jonathan's eyes grew sadder as he heard this. "And you've been alone all this time?" Delilah gave a shy smile, but without joy. "Yes, I've been getting by as best I can. Sometimes someone helps, but most of the time it's just me in the street." Jonathan, still feeling the pain in his body, now seemed more worried about her than about his own injury. "No one should go through that. It's not fair. I didn't know that. People like you, so young, were in this situation." She shrugged, trying not to seem too affected, but her words carried the weight of her reality. "That's life. We don't always choose where we end up. But it'll be all right. I'm used to it. Let's worry about you now." Jonathan squeezed her hand lightly. "You shouldn't be used to it. You shouldn't have to go through this alone." Delilah smiled, a little moved by the compassion she saw in his eyes. "I guess I'm not so alone anymore, right? At least for today. Tell me more, Delilah. How did you end up here? You mentioned your dad and your mum." Jonathan's voice was soft but full of interest. Delilah sighed, knowing he really wanted to understand. "My dad left when I was about 8. He just disappeared. One day he was there, the next he wasn't. My mum, after that, started drinking a lot. At first I thought it was just sadness, but things got worse fast. She lost her job, and little by little she lost control of her own life and couldn't take care of herself, let alone me." Jonathan listened in silence, his eyes fixed on hers. He could feel those words came from a deep place of pain. "I tried to help, but I was just a kid. She kept getting more distant. Sometimes she'd disappear for days and I didn't know what to do. When I turned 15, she disappeared for good. Never came back. Jonathan frowned, touched by the story. And you were alone? Delilah nodded slowly. Her eyes seemed lost for a second, remembering the nights she spent waiting for her mum to come back. Yes. I stayed with neighbors for a while. Then I moved from house to house with people I knew. But in time, there was no one left to take me in. I ended up on the street so I wouldn't bother anyone. Jonathan sighed, feeling the weight of those words. You were just a child. No one should go through that. She gave a sad smile. I got used to it, you know. I think when you live on the streets, you learn to accept certain things, but sometimes I still miss her, even though she abandoned me. Jonathan looked at her with sadness and empathy. Delilah, you're very strong. She shrugged, trying to hide what she felt. That's life, right? We just keep going. Jonathan took a deep breath, as if making a decision right in that moment. You don't have to face this alone anymore. I don't know exactly how, but I'm going to help you. Delilah looked at him confused. Help me? Why would you do that? You don't even know me. He smiled, even though his body was still aching. Because it's the right thing to do. And besides, you helped me without even thinking twice. I could be lying here alone now with no one, but you stayed. She looked away for a second, moved by his compassion. I just did what anyone would do. No, Delilah, Jonathan replied firmly. Not everyone would do what you did. Many would have walked past pretending they didn't see, but you didn't. That says a lot about who you are. She was speechless for a moment, not used to receiving that kind of praise. Jonathan, noticing the silence, smiled and added, I'm going to help you get off the streets. We'll figure it out together. Delilah looked at him in surprise, almost not believing it. You say that like it's easy. It won't be easy, but we'll figure it out, I promise. Jonathan spoke with so much certainty that for a moment, Delilah began to believe that maybe it was possible. The sound of the ambulance siren came from afar, and soon the red and blue lights lit up the street. 2 paramedics quickly got out of the vehicle and went over to Jonathan, checking his condition. He's hurt. He fell here on the pavement, Delilah explained as the paramedics started asking questions and examining Jonathan. One of the paramedics looked at Jonathan and spoke gently. We're going to take you to the hospital. We'll take good care of you. Jonathan, still lying down, turned his head towards Delilah. You're coming with me, aren't you? He asked, his voice quiet but full of hope. Delilah blinked, surprised. Me? To the hospital? But I'm not family, they won't let me. Jonathan held her hand with the little strength he had left. You stayed with me all this time. You didn't leave me alone. I don't want you to go. Please, come with me. She looked at him, feeling the sincerity in his voice. If you want me to come, I'll come. One of the paramedics, overhearing the conversation, gestured to Delilah. You can come with him. If he wants you there, we'll make it work. Jonathan smiled, relieved, even with the pain in his body. Thank you, Delilah. I don't want to be alone there. She smiled back, still a bit nervous about the situation, but nodded. I'll stay with you. We'll face this together, don't worry. The paramedics helped Jonathan get onto the stretcher, and Delilah got in the ambulance with him. As the doors closed and the vehicle began to move, she realized that somehow something important had changed that night. She wasn't alone anymore, and neither was Jonathan. When they arrived at the hospital, everything was a blur of activity. The doctors and nurses quickly put Jonathan on a stretcher and rushed him inside. Delilah, nervous, followed behind, but soon a nurse stopped her. Sorry, but only family can stay with him, the nurse said, looking at Delilah's clothes with a firm expression, blocking her way. Delilah looked at Jonathan, unsure what to do. She was about to say she'd wait outside when suddenly Jonathan, even in pain, lifted his head and spoke with authority. She's my daughter. The nurse, surprised, looked at Jonathan and then at Delilah, frowning. Your daughter, Jonathan confirmed with a sigh. Jonathan. Yes, my daughter. Is there a problem? She needs to stay with me. Delilah, shocked by what she heard, looked at him in confusion but stayed quiet. She knew Jonathan just wanted to keep her close, and at that moment, this lie seemed like the only way. The nurse, still suspicious, looked again at Delilah's clothes. "All right then. If that's the case, you can stay. Sorry, I got confused." Delilah followed Jonathan, still feeling a bit awkward, but with her heart beating fast. When they were alone in the room, she approached the bed where he was being treated and whispered with a shy smile, "Daughter, Mr. Jonathan?" He chuckled softly despite the pain and looked at her. "You're more of a daughter to me than anyone else. No one else cared like you did." She felt warmth in her chest at his words. "Thank you. I don't know what to say." Jonathan took a deep breath, relieved she was by his side. "Just stay here with me, that's enough." Without thinking twice, Delilah pulled up a chair and sat by his side, holding his hand again. She knew that somehow this had become much more than just helping a stranger on the street. During the following days, Delilah stayed by Jonathan's side at all times. In the hospital, she cared for him as if she had known him for years. She brought water when he needed it, helped the nurses, and always accompanied him to appointments and tests. Jonathan, in turn, felt grateful. Every time he opened his eyes and saw Delilah there, a sense of peace washed over him. They talked about everything: life, the past, and even the dreams Delilah thought she had left behind. "Have you ever thought about what you want to do with your life, Delilah?" Jonathan asked one afternoon while sitting up in bed, recovering from another test. She shrugged. "I had dreams, you know. I wanted to study, work. But everything got harder. After so much time on the streets, I don't even know what's possible anymore." Jonathan shook his head, looking at her firmly. "Nothing is out of your reach. You're an amazing person, strong. Don't let what happened take that away from you." Delilah smiled, but it was a shy, almost embarrassed smile. "No one's ever told me that before." "They should have," Jonathan replied. "You have a good heart, Delilah. That's what matters most. If I hadn't met you that night, I don't know what would have happened to me. You've done more for me in a few days than many people have in years." Those words touched Delilah. She wasn't used to receiving so much kindness and recognition. Slowly, she realized that Jonathan was becoming more than just someone she had helped. He was becoming an important figure in her life, someone who made her feel like maybe she wasn't so lost in the world. Days passed, and they laughed together, shared stories, and Jonathan always made sure to ask how she was doing. Delilah, once used to loneliness, now found herself eagerly awaiting their conversations and moments together. "You're like the daughter I never had," Jonathan said one day, his eyes shining with emotion. "I don't know what I did to deserve someone like you in my life, but I'm grateful every day." Delilah felt a lump in her throat, trying to hold back tears. "I'm the one who's grateful, Jonathan. You've given me something I didn't even know I could still have: hope." Jonathan was sitting in his hospital chair, feeling a bit better. Delilah was beside him, as always, helping with whatever he needed. That day, the lawyer Eric came to visit to discuss important matters. Delilah felt a bit uncomfortable, thinking she shouldn't be there, but Jonathan insisted she stay. Eric, a serious and very professional man, opened his briefcase and pulled out some papers. "Jonathan, we need to talk about your will. As you know, your 2 children are already included, but you mentioned wanting to make some changes." Jonathan took a deep breath and looked at Delilah, who was surprised by his gaze. She didn't know what was coming. "I want to include Delilah in my will," Jonathan said calmly. Eric stopped writing for a moment and looked up, clearly surprised. "Delilah?" Jonathan nodded firmly. "Yes, Delilah. She's been by my side this whole time, looked after me when no one else cared. She deserves to be a part of this." Delilah's eyes widened, shocked. "Jonathan, I don't know what to say. I don't need anything. I just want you to be okay." He smiled at her warmly. "You deserve much more than you think, Delilah. You're like a daughter to me now, and I want you to have what's fair." Eric, still trying to understand the decision, asked cautiously, "Jonathan, are you sure? This might complicate things with your children. They might not like it." Jonathan shook his head. "My children already have more than enough. Delilah, on the other hand, has no one. She deserves a chance at a better life." Eric took a deep breath and adjusted his glasses, still incredulous. "I understand, but you know they're going to question this, right? It won't be easy dealing with their reaction." Jonathan looked Eric straight in the eye, firm. I know, but this is my decision and I'm not changing my mind. Delilah was still in shock. She never expected something like this. Jonathan, you don't have to do this. I just want you to know I'm here for you, not for anything else. Jonathan smiled, his eyes full of affection. I know that, Delilah, and that's exactly why you deserve it. Don't worry. Eric adjusted his glasses again, clearly concerned as he looked between Jonathan and Delilah. Jonathan, I need to be honest with you, Eric began, his voice firm but calm. This decision could lead to many legal complications. Your children may contest the will, claim you're not in the right state of mind to make decisions. They'll question why Delilah is included. Delilah stayed quiet, looking at the floor, already feeling uncomfortable with the situation. She didn't want to cause trouble, especially not for someone who had been so kind to her. Jonathan, however, kept his gaze fixed on Eric, unwavering. I understand what you're saying, Eric, but I'm fully aware of what I'm doing. Eric sighed, trying to explain further. I'm not saying you don't have the right, Jonathan, but your children might argue that you were influenced, that Delilah is trying to take advantage. It could turn into a long legal battle. Delilah quickly raised her head, waving her hands. I don't want to cause any problems. If it's going to create confusion, I'd rather you not do this, Jonathan. Jonathan looked at her, his eyes full of kindness. Delilah, this isn't about causing problems or avoiding fights. It's about what I believe is right. You've done more for me in a few weeks than my children have in years. They have everything while you have no one, and I want to change that. Eric, realizing Jonathan was determined, tried one more time. I understand you care about Delilah, but think about the consequences. This could turn into a long, complicated process. Jonathan took a deep breath, his expression resolute. I'm prepared for that. If my children want to fight, let them fight. I'm not backing down. Delilah will get what she deserves, and I won't let anything or anyone stop that. Eric, seeing there was no point in arguing further, picked up his pen and started making the necessary notes. All right, Jonathan, I'll proceed with your decision. I just want you to be aware of the challenges this might bring. Jonathan smiled, with the calm that comes only from someone absolutely sure of their choices. I'm aware, Eric, and I have no doubts. Delilah, still with a tight feeling in her chest, looked at Jonathan with gratitude. She never imagined anyone would do so much for her, and despite all the uncertainties ahead, she knew he was doing this out of love, not obligation. Another day, Jonathan was sitting in his hospital chair, already showing signs of improvement but still needing care. Delilah, as always, was by his side, helping with small tasks, bringing water, adjusting pillows. They talked more and more, and the bond between them grew stronger every day. In one of those conversations, Jonathan decided it was time to talk about something important. Delilah, I've been thinking about what I'll do when I leave here, he said, in a serious but gentle tone. Delilah, not understanding, looked at him. What do you mean you're getting much better, soon you'll be home? Jonathan gave a small smile, but his eyes showed there was more on his mind. Exactly. But that's what I want to talk about. When I leave here, I don't want to go back to my house alone. I want you to come live with me. Delilah's eyes widened in surprise. Live with you? Jonathan, I don't know what to say. You've already done so much for me, this would be too much and people would think it's strange. He shook his head slowly. It's not too much, Delilah. I'm thinking about what's right. You don't have anywhere to stay, and I don't want to be alone in that big house. We both win if we stay together. I want that house to be yours when I'm gone. She blinked several times, trying to process what he had just said. Jonathan, the house. You want to give me your house? I can't accept that. I just want to help, like I always have. Jonathan smiled, reaching out to take her hand. You already help me in ways no one else has. I'm not asking for anything big. The house is already too big for me. And besides, with you there, I'd have a friend, someone I trust. You help me, and I help you. Delilah was speechless for a moment, moved by the generous offer. But what about your children? They won't accept this. Jonathan sighed, but kept his gaze steady. They have their own lives, Delilah. They're well off, and they've never really cared about me. It's not them who come to visit or help me get out of bed. You do that, and I want to give you something in return, something to make your life better." Delilah lowered her eyes, emotional but still hesitant. I don't want to cause trouble." Jonathan squeezed her hand lightly. "It won't cause trouble. We'll handle this the right way. You deserve a place to call your own, and I'll help you with that. We'll live together while I recover, and then the house will be yours. It's my decision." With tears in her eyes, Delilah looked at him and finally smiled, though her heart was heavy. "I don't know how to thank you, Jonathan. I promise I'll take care of you like I always have, and if you really want this, I accept." Jonathan smiled back, satisfied. "That's what I want. We'll face everything together, like always." Despite Jonathan's kindness and the affection he showed her, Delilah couldn't shake a thought that made her uneasy. His children. She knew that at some point they would find out about Jonathan's decisions, and that could cause problems. The fear of facing people she had never met, who would surely not accept her in their father's life, made her anxious. One morning, while helping Jonathan adjust the pillow behind his back, she decided to talk about what had been bothering her. "Jonathan, I need to tell you something. I'm scared of your children. What if they don't accept all of this? What if they think I'm here for selfish reasons?" Jonathan looked at her calmly, understanding the worry in the air. He took her hand, giving her a serene and confident look. "Delilah, I know my children won't like it, but I trust you. I know you're not here for the money or the house. You've helped me from the start, expecting nothing in return." Delilah bit her lip, still feeling uncertain. "I don't want to cause more problems for you. I've heard stories of families fighting over inheritances, and your children might try to push me away from you." Jonathan took a deep breath and spoke firmly. "I know they might try, Delilah, but the truth is, they've never really cared about me. They have their own lives and only show up when they need something. But you've been here when I needed someone the most, and I won't let anyone take that away from us." She looked at him, trying to calm down but still feeling nervous. "I trust you, Jonathan. I just want what's best for you. If I feel like I'm causing trouble, I can leave if I need to." Jonathan immediately shook his head, his expression serious. "You're not going anywhere. I've already decided, Delilah. You're part of my life now, part of my family, and I won't let anyone make you feel any different." Delilah felt a wave of emotion from those words. "Thank you. I just don't want people to think badly of me. I'm not here to take anyone's place." Jonathan smiled softly, squeezing her hand gently. "They can think whatever they want, but I'm the one who decides. And I've decided that you deserve to be by my side, not out of obligation, but because you've brought me peace, kindness, something I haven't had in a long time." With those words, Delilah felt her heart lighten. Although she still feared what Jonathan's children might do, she trusted him. As time passed, just as Delilah feared, Jonathan's children eventually found out about their father's decisions. The news that he had included Delilah in his will and planned to leave the house to her hit them like a bomb. Soon a major conflict began. One afternoon, while Delilah and Jonathan were sitting in the garden, enjoying the sun, Jonathan's children arrived unannounced. There were two of them, Mark and Sarah, both with serious faces and clearly upset. They barely greeted their father and immediately started speaking in a rush. "Dad, this doesn't make any sense," said Mark, crossing his arms. "How can you give the house to her? You're getting confused. You're not thinking straight." Jonathan, who had expected this reaction, looked firmly at his son. "Mark, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm perfectly clear-minded." Sarah, impatient, stepped closer. "This isn't right. She came out of nowhere and now she's going to get everything. Dad, you're being manipulated by this tramp." Delilah, sitting next to Jonathan, stayed silent, her heart racing. She knew this would happen, but it was still hard to hear those words. Jonathan raised his hand, asking for calm. "No one is manipulating me, Sarah. I made this choice because it's the right thing to do. Delilah took care of me when you weren't here, and she deserves to have a better life. I made this decision with full clarity, Mark shook his head, frustrated. This can't go on. You're not in a position to make these decisions. We've already talked to a lawyer. We're going to ask for you to be declared unfit. You need to be in a care facility, Dad. It's clear you're not thinking right. Jonathan looked at his two children, his eyes filled with frustration. You're saying I'm not capable of making my own decisions just because they don't align with what you want. It's for your own good, Dad, insisted Sarah. You need proper care. It's not safe for you to stay here with this girl. We're going to fix this. Delilah felt her blood run cold with those words. I just want to help. I never meant to cause problems. Sarah gave Delilah a harsh look. Help? You're just an opportunist, trying to take advantage of an old man. Jonathan slammed his hand on the arm of his chair, his patience running out. Enough! You don't have the right to come here and treat us like this. I'm fully aware and nothing you do is going to change what I've decided. But Mark and Sarah didn't give up. Soon after, they filed a legal case to try to declare Jonathan unfit to make decisions and force him into a care facility. They claimed their father was being manipulated by Delilah and no longer able to manage his own affairs. It was a difficult time. Delilah and Jonathan had to face not only the legal pressure, but also the judgment of people who thought she was trying to take advantage of him. Several court hearings were scheduled, and Delilah was called to testify. She prepared with the lawyer Eric, who helped her understand how to answer the judge's questions clearly and honestly. During the process, Jonathan remained firm. He attended the hearings and made sure to speak for himself, proving to the judge that he was mentally capable. I know exactly what I'm doing. My children may not understand, but this is my choice. Delilah, for her part, told the full story of how she had met Jonathan when he was hurt in the street. She explained how she never wanted anything from him and that she had always helped him because she genuinely cared. With the final hearing approaching, Delilah was nervous. She knew Jonathan's children would do everything they could to push her out, and the idea of facing a judge made her anxious. Eric, the lawyer, noticing how worried she was, decided to have a calm conversation with her. They sat in the meeting room at Eric's office, and he began speaking in a calm, firm tone. Delilah, I know you're nervous, and it's normal to feel that way, but the best thing you can do in court is to be completely honest. Delilah looked at him, biting her lip. What if they hit me with difficult questions? Jonathan's children already think I'm just after his money. I don't know what to say. Eric smiled slightly, trying to reassure her. The truth will always be your best defense. You don't need to make anything up, because everything you did was out of care and respect for Jonathan. The judge will want to hear your side of the story, so you just need to tell them exactly what happened. Delilah took a deep breath and asked, What if they try to make me look like a bad person? Eric shook his head. Jonathan's children's lawyers might try to pressure you, but don't let that scare you. Remember, you're there because you did the right thing. When they ask why you stayed by Jonathan's side, tell the truth, that you helped because you cared, because he became someone important to you, like family. Delilah listened closely. I know I did it for him, but what if the judge doesn't believe me? He will believe you, Eric replied confidently. If you're sincere, that will show. Explain how you met, how you grew close, and that you never expected anything in return. The most important thing is for you to stay calm and show who you really are. Delilah sighed, feeling a little relief from Eric's words. I'll try. I just don't want to mess everything up. Eric placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You won't mess anything up. You're here because you deserve to be. The judge wants to hear the truth, and that's on your side. Trust yourself. Delilah gave a small smile, feeling a bit more confident. Thank you, Eric. I'll do my best. He smiled back. That's all you need to do, and I'll be there with you, helping you every step of the way. With those words, Delilah felt that despite the tension, she had the strength to face whatever came. The day of the hearing finally arrived, and Delilah was nervous but determined. She entered the courtroom beside Jonathan and the lawyer Eric, trying to stay calm. Jonathan's children were on the other side of the room with stern expressions, clearly ready to fight. The atmosphere felt heavy, but Delilah knew she had to be strong. The judge, a serious-looking man, began speaking, asking everyone to sit down. He looked at the documents, then at Delilah. "Miss Delilah, I've heard what has been said here and understand the concerns of Mr. Jonathan's children. However, I'd like to hear your version. Why are you in the will? What is your relationship with Jonathan?" Delilah took a deep breath and remembered Eric's words. She knew she just needed to be honest. "Your Honor, I met Mr. Jonathan on a very difficult night. He was lying in the street, hurt, and I decided to help him. From that day, I stayed by his side, helping him however I could. I never expected anything in return. I did it because he became like a father to me." The judge listened attentively, and Delilah felt more confident to continue. "I don't have a family, and Jonathan welcomed me as if I were part of his. We formed a strong bond, one of trust and care. I never asked to be in the will. It was his decision. All I want is the best for Jonathan, and to care for him as he cared for me." Jonathan's children's lawyers argued that she had no right to part of the inheritance, that everything should go to his biological children. They claimed Jonathan was being influenced, and that Delilah wasn't part of the family. But Jonathan, in a firm voice, interrupted. "I'm completely aware of my decisions. Delilah was the only one who stayed by my side all this time. My children, as much as I love them, never truly cared about what was happening to me. Delilah took care of me, and my decision to include her in the will was because she deserves it." The judge listened carefully, looking at the documents and the witnesses. After a few minutes of silence, he spoke firmly. "Considering everything that has been presented, it's clear that Mr. Jonathan is in full control of his decisions. As for Miss Delilah, I see no evidence that she acted with ill intentions. Therefore, I accept that she remains in the will and retains her portion of the inheritance, as decided by Mr. Jonathan." Delilah felt an enormous weight lift off her shoulders. She looked at Jonathan, who smiled slightly, satisfied with the decision. The legal battle with Jonathan's children would continue, but for now the court had granted her the right to stay by Jonathan's side and be part of his inheritance. "Thank you, Your Honor," Delilah said, her voice emotional. She knew there was still a long road ahead, but in that moment she felt she had gained something more valuable than money or property. She had gained recognition for her worth and Jonathan's support. Jonathan squeezed her hand and spoke quietly. "I told you everything would be all right, Delilah. We're in this together." And she smiled back, feeling that no matter how difficult things got, they were ready to face whatever came together. Mark and Sarah left the courtroom furious, but they knew there was nothing more they could do. Delilah, relieved, looked at Jonathan, who hugged her and smiled. After all the chaos of the hearings and Jonathan's children's attempt to take control, the days began to calm down. Jonathan sat in his favorite chair at home, while Delilah made him a cup of tea in the kitchen. Even after all the battles, Jonathan kept his calm smile and the same kindness in his eyes. When Delilah returned with the tea, he watched her, his eyes full of gratitude. "You know, Delilah, I've been thinking a lot lately, about everything that's happened, about life, and I need to tell you something." She looked at him, curious. "What is it, Jonathan?" He took the cup, holding it carefully, and gave a serene smile. "I know we don't share blood, but that's never mattered to me. You've given me more care and attention since the day we met than my children have given me in their entire lives." Delilah, surprised by his words, sat down beside him. "I just did what I thought was right. You needed help, and I couldn't leave someone I barely knew in that situation." Jonathan chuckled softly. "And that's when you showed me something I didn't know I still had in my life. You cared. Even without knowing me, you cared in a way my own children never did." Delilah was silent for a moment, moved. "I never thought about it like that, Jonathan. I just wanted to help. Since that day on the street, and you made me feel like I could still have something good in life." Jonathan set the cup of tea aside and took her hand, his eyes shining with sincerity. "You're part of my family, Delilah. Even without blood ties, you're my daughter at heart, and nothing can change that." Delilah felt tears welling up in her eyes. She never imagined anyone could say something so beautiful and true to her. "I don't even know what to say. I never thought I'd have a family again after everything that happened. Jonathan smiled and gently squeezed her hand. You have a family now. I'll always be here for you, just like you've been here for me. Delilah took a deep breath, emotional, but also happy. Thank you, Jonathan. You've given me something I never thought I'd have again. And I'll always be here to take care of you, like a real family. The days following the hearing were peaceful, but Delilah couldn't shake the feeling of insecurity that sometimes crept in. Despite Jonathan's support and the judge's decision, she still had doubts about the future. What if his children tried again? What if in the end everything fell apart? One night while they were having dinner together in the kitchen, Jonathan noticed that Delilah was quieter than usual. He put his fork down and looked at her with concern. You seem worried, Delilah. What's going on? She sighed, pushing her food around her plate without much interest. I just keep wondering if I'm doing the right thing. Sometimes I feel like I don't belong here, like I'm taking up space that isn't mine. Jonathan frowned, clearly worried. Where did you get that idea? Delilah shrugged, unsure how to explain. I know you see me as part of your family, but what if others never accept me? What if in the end I lose everything? I don't want to disappoint you. Jonathan leaned forward slightly, looking her straight in the eyes. Listen, Delilah. You don't have to worry about what others think. The only thing that matters is that you're here because I want you here. Because you deserve to be here. She lowered her head, still feeling unsure. But what if your children keep trying? I'm afraid they'll eventually win, and I'll lose all of this. Jonathan took a deep breath and spoke in a calm voice. Let me tell you something. Life is full of challenges. There will always be someone trying to bring you down, trying to make you believe you're not good enough. But you are, Delilah. From the first day, you did the right thing, followed your heart and helped without expecting anything in return. And that's why you're on the right path. Delilah looked at him, touched by his words. I just don't want you to think I'm weak for having these fears. Jonathan smiled, shaking his head. Fear isn't weakness. Everyone feels afraid. The difference is that you don't let it stop you. And I believe in you. I know you'll face anything that comes your way. You're stronger than you realize, Delilah, more than you can imagine. She felt tears welling up in her eyes, but tried to hide them with a shy smile. Thank you, Jonathan. I don't know where I'd be without you. Jonathan placed his hand on hers with a firm and caring look. You don't have to be alone anymore, Delilah. We're in this together. And I know with time you'll see that there's nothing to fear. You're exactly where you're supposed to be, and I'm very proud of you. As time went on, Delilah's life began to change in ways she had never imagined. Despite all the uncertainties they had faced together, something inside her began to transform. Jonathan didn't just offer her a home and kindness, he gave her the chance to start over. One day, as they sat in the garden, Jonathan looked at Delilah with a calm smile and said, Delilah, I've been thinking. Have you ever thought about going back to school? I know life took you off that path, but it's never too late to start again. She was a bit surprised by the question. Me? Study again? I don't even know where to begin, Jonathan. It's been so long. Jonathan smiled. It's never too late, my dear. Education can open doors you never even imagined. I know you have a lot of potential, and I want to help you discover it. You have dreams, and I want you to chase them. Touched by his words, Delilah felt her heart race. The idea of going back to school seemed distant, almost impossible. I don't know if I can, Jonathan. I stopped studying so early, and there's so much I don't remember. What if I fail? Jonathan placed a hand on her shoulder and said firmly, It doesn't matter if it takes time or if it's hard. What matters is that you try. And I'll be here, by your side, every step of the way. There's no need to be afraid. With Jonathan's encouragement, Delilah found the courage to enroll in classes, slowly returning to her studies. At first it was difficult. She felt insecure, afraid she wouldn't be able to keep up. But Jonathan was always there, telling her she was capable, that she just needed to believe in herself. I've been through much harder things, Delilah, he'd say with a confident smile. Studying is just another challenge, and you've already proven you're stronger than you think. Years passed, and with every new step Delilah took, she became more confident. Slowly, she began to see herself differently, realizing that despite all the difficulties, she was building a new path. Jonathan, in turn, always reminded her of her worth. He made sure to be there for every achievement. When she got a good grade, Jonathan would greet her with a big hug and say, "I knew you'd do it." Over time, Delilah realized that Jonathan's unwavering support wasn't just about her studies. He was giving her something she had never really had before. Someone who believed in her, who wanted to see her grow. And with that came something even more important: hope. Hope that she could indeed have a different future. Not only did Delilah advance in her studies, but she also began thinking of new plans for the future. She wanted to use what she was learning to help others, just as Jonathan had helped her. If I manage to start over, she thought, maybe I can help others do the same. Jonathan, now older and frailer with the passing years, always watched with pride at every little victory Delilah achieved. "You're proof that life can always start again," he'd say with a warm smile. Years passed, and Delilah and Jonathan continued building their life together. Jonathan, now older and more fragile, was still always by Delilah's side, following her achievements and celebrating every step she took toward a better future. But time took its toll, and the day came when Jonathan peacefully left this world. The emptiness he left behind was immense. Delilah, now stronger but with a heavy heart full of sadness, arranged everything to say goodbye to the man who had become her true family. At the funeral, she held the watch he had given her as a symbol of their connection. A few days later, Eric, Jonathan's trusted lawyer, asked to meet with Delilah. She went to his office not knowing what to expect. Sitting in front of Eric, still mourning, she listened as he explained that there was something else Jonathan had left behind. "Delilah, Jonathan left an updated will, something he did without anyone knowing." "He did it just a short time before he passed," Eric began to explain, looking at her seriously. Delilah frowned, confused. "But we already talked about the will. He had already made everything clear with his children and me. Why would he make another one?" Eric opened his briefcase and took out a document. "It seems that before he passed, Jonathan decided to change his will again. He cancelled the previous one and left everything he had to you." Delilah was in shock. "Everything? What do you mean by everything?" Eric took a deep breath and continued, "Yes, everything. The house, his belongings, his savings. Jonathan made sure that you wouldn't have to worry about anything in the future. He believed this was his way of thanking you for everything you did for him. This secret will override the previous one, where the children still had a part." She sat in silence for a moment, trying to process what she had just heard. "I don't know what to say. He had already given me so much, he didn't need to do this." Eric smiled slightly with empathy. "He did it because he wanted to, Delilah. Jonathan knew how much care and love you gave him. He believed you deserved to continue this new life without any worries. He trusted you, educated you with your studies, and wanted you to know that everything he had is now yours." Delilah looked at the document, still in disbelief. "I just wish he were here. I never did anything expecting this. I just wanted to take care of him." Eric placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "He knew that. That's why he did what he did. Jonathan didn't just give you an inheritance, Delilah. He gave you a future. And I know he left in peace, knowing that you're taken care of." With tears in her eyes, Delilah took the document. She knew Jonathan had left more than just material things. He had left proof that he fully trusted her, that he considered her family until the very end. "Thank you, Jonathan," she whispered, looking up at the sky. "I will honor everything you did for me, and I will keep moving forward, just like you always wanted." With a heart full of gratitude and longing, Delilah left the office knowing that even after Jonathan's passing, he was still taking care of her. A few days after Delilah discovered Jonathan's secret will, the news reached his children, Mark and Sarah. They were furious when they found out their father had left everything to Delilah. Without wasting any time, the two went to the house, determined to confront her. They knocked hard on the door, and as Delilah heard it, she knew a storm was about to begin. She opened the door and came face to face with them, their faces red with anger. Sarah was the first to speak, her voice full of disdain. "What did you do, Delilah? How did you convince our father to leave everything to you?" Mark crossed his arms, glaring at her. "This isn't going to stand. Do you really think you're going to get away with this? This house should be ours. The previous will was fair. And now suddenly you have everything?" Delilah took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but the pain and frustration from everything they had done since the beginning started to rise. She knew she couldn't stay silent any longer. "Are you really surprised?" she said, looking directly at them. "You never cared about him. Since the first hearing, all you've cared about is the money, the inheritance. When was the last time either of you came to see Jonathan? When was the last time you called to ask how he was?" They stayed silent, having no answer, but their anger was still obvious. "I'll tell you," Delilah continued, her voice firmer. "Never. Since the hearing, you disappeared. Not one visit, not one phone call, not even at the end of his life. You abandoned your own father, and now you have the nerve to come here and demand what he left behind. You won't see a single thing that was his." Sarah tried to respond, but Delilah didn't give her the chance. "You think you deserve this house, this money, but you don't deserve anything. Jonathan left everything to me because he knew who was by his side. He knew who really cared." Mark, still in disbelief at what he was hearing, shouted, "This isn't fair, he was our father." Delilah shook her head, now with tears of anger in her eyes. "Yes, he was, but you treated him like he wasn't. He left everything to me because I was there when he needed someone. I cared for him, helped him, while you were only worried about what you were going to get. Jonathan knew who was with him out of love, not greed." Sarah, with fury in her eyes, tried to step towards Delilah, but Mark held her back. "This isn't over," he said through gritted teeth. "We're going to fight for this." Delilah, now calmer, just looked at them. "Do what you want, but what you were after isn't here anymore. What Jonathan left for me is much more than money or a house. He gave me confidence, gave me a family, something you threw away a long time ago." Without another word, Delilah closed the door in their faces, leaving the two outside, unsure of what to do next. As she walked back through the house, she felt a mix of sadness and relief. Jonathan had chosen her, and now, with the memories of him in her heart, she knew she was ready to move forward, unafraid of whatever might come. Years after everything that had happened, Delilah's life had transformed in ways she had never imagined. With Jonathan's support and everything he left for her, Delilah was able to build a new life, full of love and hope. She continued her studies, found a professional path, and later met someone special, someone who brought even more happiness into her life. Time passed, and Delilah got married. The wedding day was simple but full of meaning. She knew Jonathan would have been proud of her, seeing how she had overcome everything and found happiness. Together with her husband, Delilah built a loving and welcoming family, something she had always dreamed of but never thought possible. A few years later, Delilah found out she was pregnant. The news filled her and her husband with joy, and soon they began discussing names for the baby. Delilah knew exactly which name she wanted, without any doubt in her heart. When the day finally came, and she held her son in her arms for the first time, Delilah's heart filled with love and nostalgia. Looking at the baby, she said softly, with a voice full of tenderness, "Your name will be Jonathan." Her husband smiled, understanding the deep meaning behind the name. "It's the perfect name," he said, holding her hand with affection. Delilah looked at the baby's face and felt a special connection. "This name means so much to me," she said, tears in her eyes, remembering the journey she had taken. "Jonathan was the one who gave me a second chance at life, and now I want my son to carry that name so he'll know the importance of love, care, and true family." She knew that Jonathan's legacy would live on, not only through her son's name but also in everything Jonathan had taught her. The importance of being there for the people you love, the value of compassion, and the power of kindness. And so, with her little Jonathan in her arms, Delilah felt that in a special way, the story that began on that cold night when she found a man injured in the street had now come full circle. She had found a family, and now she was starting a new generation, carrying with her the love and lessons Jonathan had given her. This story shows us that love and family aren't defined by blood, but by care, respect, and support. Delilah teaches us that even in the worst situations, we can find people who believe in us and help us start over. Jonathan, in turn, reminds us that the true value of life lies in the connections we build and how much we care for one another. Now we want to hear from you. What did you think of this story? Have you ever experienced something that made you realize the true value of family? Leave your comment below and share your experience with us. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, full of lessons and emotions. Hit the bell so you don't miss any new videos. Oh, and before you go, click here on the screen to watch more videos that will touch your heart and inspire you. I'm sure you'll love them.